The cold fluorescent lights of the hospital were the first thing Chloe saw when she woke up. The sharp smell of antiseptic stung her nostrils, and a dull, empty ache coiled deep in her belly. Ethan, her husband, was sitting beside her, holding her hand tightly. His face was gaunt, his usually confident blue eyes now heavy with grief. He didn't have to say anything. Chloe knew. She had known from the moment the horrific cramp had torn her from sleep, and she had seen the dark red bloom on their Egyptian cotton sheets. The doctors said, Ethan began, his voice hoarse. They said it's very common. It's not your fault, honey. It's nobody's fault. Chloe didn't hear him. Her mind was trapped in the terrifying moment just before she had blacked out. It hadn't been a dream. It was too real or too vivid. She had seen a figure standing at the foot of the bed in their darkened Greenwich, Connecticut bedroom. At first she thought it was Ethan, but then the figure stepped into the weak slash of light from the window. It was Eleanor, her mother-in-law. She was wearing a jade green silk nightgown, her platinum blonde hair in a perfect chignon, even in the middle of the night. But it was her eyes that made Chloe's blood run cold. They were flat, emotionless, and held a cruel, triumphant gleam. She wasn't holding a stick or any kind of weapon. She just stood there staring at Chloe's stomach. And then her perfectly painted red lips moved, forming a single word, a whisper that Chloe didn't hear with her ears but felt with her soul. Empty. The pain had come right after that. It was your mother, Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. She was in our room. Ethan frowned, smoothing back her tangled hair. Honey, you had a nightmare. Mom's at her house in Scarsdale. She wasn't here. No, Ethan, I saw her. She was standing right there, and she looked at me. Chloe broke down choked sobs, shaking her frame. She did something. Shh, Chloe, don't say that. Ethan cut in gently, but there was an edge to his voice. You're in shock. You've been through a trauma. Mom's been worried sick. She's coming as soon as she can. He didn't believe her. Chloe could see it in his eyes, the pity, the concern that she was losing her mind. For Ethan, everything had a logical explanation. He was a successful investment lawyer, a man who lived by logic and numbers. Phantoms in the night and whispered curses had no place in his world. And his mother Eleanor was a pillar of society, a philanthropist whose name was on museum wings and hospital wards. The idea that she could harm anyone, especially her own unborn grandchild, was unthinkable, ludicrous. But Chloe knew what she had seen. Eleanor arrived late that afternoon. She brought an enormous bouquet of white lilies, their cloying scent filling the small room. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored Chanel suit, not a hair out of place. She hugged Chloe, a hug that was stiff and cold. Oh, my poor girl, Eleanor said, her voice soft as velvet. I'm so sorry for what happened, but you must be strong for Ethan. These things are life's trials. Chloe pulled back, looking directly into her mother-in-law's eyes, searching for a sign, a flicker of remorse, a glimpse of the dark truth she had seen last night. But Eleanor's eyes were a frozen, impenetrable lake. I saw you, Chloe said flatly, ignoring Ethan's warning squeeze of her hand. Last night, in my bedroom. A tense silence filled the room. Eleanor blinked slowly, a sad, sympathetic smile playing on her lips. Chloe, darling, the doctor told me you might experience hallucinations from the blood loss and stress. Your mind is playing tricks on you. I was home all night. You can call my housekeeper to confirm. She turned to Ethan, placing a hand on his arm. Sima, perhaps we should let her rest. She's exhausted. Eleanor had expertly twisted Chloe's accusation into a symptom of hysteria. She had planted the seed of doubt in Ethan's mind, reinforcing the idea that his wife was unstable. As she left, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and the snow-white lilies, Chloe felt a cold isolation creep over her, more frightening than the physical pain. The only person who truly listened was Jessica. Chloe's best friend burst into the hospital room as soon as she heard the news, her fiery red hair a warm blaze in the sterile room. She brought no flowers, but a bag of junk food and a stack of gossip magazines. She climbed onto the bed and wrapped Chloe in a hug, letting her sob on her shoulder. I saw her, Jess, Chloe choked out. I swear I saw her. Unlike Ethan, Jessica didn't dismiss her out of hand. She listened intently, her hazel eyes thoughtful. "That old bat is a witch," Jessica whispered low enough for only Chloe to hear. "I've never trusted her perfect facade. But what do you mean, she did something?" "I don't know," Chloe admitted, feeling helpless. "It was like she just looked at my stomach and I felt everything inside me die. Does that sound crazy?" "It doesn't sound crazy," Jessica said firmly, squeezing her friend's hand. "If you saw it, you saw it. We'll figure it out." Jessica's unconditional belief was Chloe's only lifeline in a sea of doubt and grief. A few days later, Chloe was discharged. The Greenwich house, once her sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. Every corner seemed to whisper of her loss. Ethan tried his best to get things back to normal. He suggested a trip to the Caribbean, talked about trying again as soon as the doctors gave the okay. He was trying to fix the problem with practical solutions, not realizing Chloe's wound was more than physical. One evening, while putting away a few baby items she had bought, Chloe stumbled upon their wedding album. She flipped through the pages, looking at the smiling faces. And then she stopped on a family portrait. She and Ethan were in the center, radiant. Beside Ethan was Eleanor, looking regal in a silver blue gown. She was smiling, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, even in this happy photograph, were fixed on Chloe with a cool, calculating expression. Chloe remembered that day. She remembered Eleanor's reluctant approval of their marriage. "As long as my son is happy," she had said, but her tone had suggested otherwise. Chloe slammed the album shut. A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the chill in the room. She looked out the window where darkness was falling over their manicured garden. She had the feeling that she was being watched, that the venomous whisper she'd heard on that fateful night still lingered in the air. This was just the beginning. An invisible war had just begun, and Chloe realized with a growing sense of dread that she was in it alone. The following weeks passed in a haze of grief and heavy silence. The Greenwich house, with its cavernous rooms and windows overlooking perfectly manicured lawns, now felt like a mausoleum. Ethan had returned to work, burying himself in spreadsheets and late-night meetings, an escape they both tacitly understood. He treated Chloe with a careful gentleness, as if she were a glass doll who might shatter at any moment. He never brought up the incident again, nor her wild accusations against his mother. He simply avoided it, leaving a growing chasm between them. Chloe felt herself shrinking inside her own home. She wandered from room to room, the ghost of what she had lost trailing her every step. The room that was meant to be the nursery remained closed, a silent reminder of a stolen future. Sometimes she would stand before the door, her hand on the cold knob, but she could never bring herself to open it. And then on a gray Tuesday afternoon, Eleanor arrived. She came unannounced. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, simply announced that Mrs. Prescott Sr. is here, and a moment later, Eleanor appeared in the living room doorway, magnificent in a camel-colored cashmere coat, a chauffeur trailing behind her with 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases. "Chloe, darling," Eleanor said, opening her arms. "I couldn't bear the thought of you here all alone day after day. I'm going to stay for a few weeks to look after you." Her smile was radiant. Her voice dripped with feigned concern, but her eyes were ice. A wave of panic rose in Chloe. This was her house. But the way Eleanor strode in, the way she gestured to the housekeeper where to put her bags, was as if she were the mistress of the manor. She was the perfect invader, cloaked in love and care. When Ethan came home that evening, he was delighted. "Mom, this is wonderful. I've been so worried about Chloe," he said, hugging his mother. He looked at Chloe, a pleading look for her to agree. "Isn't this great, honey, to have Mom here?" Chloe could only manage a weak nod, feeling the trap closing around her. Life with Eleanor was an exercise in sophisticated psychological torture. She never overtly criticized Chloe. Instead, it was a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts of helpful suggestions and subtle remarks that slowly chipped away at Chloe's confidence and her sense of ownership in her own home. It started in the kitchen. "Oh, darling, don't you worry about a thing," Eleanor would say, gently nudging Chloe away from the stove. "You need to rest. Let me make dinner. I know exactly how Ethan likes his steak. Eleanor's meals were always perfect, and Ethan would praise them effusively unwittingly, making Chloe's own culinary efforts seem pale in comparison. Then came the moving of objects. A book Chloe was halfway through would vanish from her nightstand and reappear on a shelf in the library. Her car keys, always kept on a hook by the door, would be found in a miscellaneous drawer. Each time Chloe expressed confusion, Eleanor would feign concern. "Are you sure you left it there, Chloe? You've been a bit forgetful lately. It's completely understandable." Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper who had worked for Ethan's family for years, began taking her orders directly from Eleanor. Cleaning schedules were changed, menus were planned without consulting Chloe. Chloe felt herself becoming a ghost, a guest in her own life. The first major confrontation happened one morning. Chloe was sitting in the sunroom trying to read when Eleanor entered holding a small Tiffany blue velvet box. "I have something for you," she said, sitting opposite Chloe. "It's a Prescott family heirloom. I want you to have it." Inside was a silver locket intricately carved. It was beautiful. As Chloe picked it up, an unpleasant chill seeped from the metal into her skin. She opened it. Instead of the customary space for two small photos, both inner surfaces were engraved with the same image: a stark, barren tree, its branches reaching like skeletal fingers under a sliver of a moon. A cold dread trickled down Chloe's spine. It wasn't the tree of life. It was a tree of death. It was a symbol of barrenness, of emptiness. Empty. The whisper from that horrible night echoed in her head. "It's unique," Chloe managed to say, her voice trembling. "Yes, it is," Eleanor said, her eyes glinting with a strange light. "It represents the strength and endurance of our line through the generations. Wear it, my dear. It will remind you of your place." Your place? The words hung in the air like a slap. Chloe looked up, meeting Eleanor's gaze directly. For the first time, she didn't try to hide her fear. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "Why do you hate me so much?" Eleanor's smile vanished, replaced by a cool, hard mask. "I don't know what you're talking about. I am simply trying to welcome you into the family. Perhaps you should speak with your doctor again, Chloe. Your grief is making you imagine things." Just then, Ethan walked into the room, having finished a work call. He saw the locket in Chloe's hand and the tense expressions on both women's faces. "Oh, Mom gave it to you," he said with a smile. "Isn't it beautiful? It's an old family piece." "Ethan," Chloe began, her voice desperate. "Look inside. It's a dead tree." Ethan took the locket and looked. He frowned. "I don't think so, honey. I think it's a winter tree. It's very artistic. Mom, this is a wonderful gift." He turned to Chloe, his tone shifting, laced with disappointment. "Chloe, you can't do this. Mom is just trying to be kind. You're turning everything into an attack." "You don't get it," Chloe cried, jumping to her feet. "This isn't a gift, it's a curse." Silence descended on the room. Ethan stared at her, confusion and frustration warring on his face. Eleanor just sat there, serene and victorious, an "I told you so" look etched on her perfect features. Chloe felt hot tears welling up. She had lost. Again. She had been cornered, framed as hysterical, unstable, and ungrateful. She turned and fled upstairs, a sob catching in her throat. She slammed her bedroom door and locked it, sliding to the floor. She couldn't live like this, trapped in this house with the woman who wanted to destroy her and a husband who refused to see the truth. She shakily pulled out her phone. There was only one person who would believe her. She dialed Jessica. "Jess," she said, her voice breaking, "can you come get me? Right now? I think I'm going crazy." "I'm on my way." Jessica's voice came back firm and without a hint of hesitation. "Don't go anywhere. Lock your door and wait for me." For the first time in weeks, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in the darkness. She wasn't completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, the fight wasn't over yet. Jessica arrived like a hurricane. Less than 40 minutes after the call, her red Mini Cooper screeched up the gravel driveway, ignoring the speed limit sign. She didn't ring the bell. She hammered on the heavy oak door with the heel of her hand, and when Mrs. Gable opened it with a sour expression, Jessica swept past her without a word, taking the stairs 2 at a time. "Chloe," she called, her voice echoing in the oppressive silence of the house. Chloe unlocked the door. The moment Jessica saw her friend's tear-streaked face and panicked eyes, her warrior expression softened into deep concern. She pulled Chloe into a fierce hug. "I'm here," she whispered. "What happened? What did the dragon lady do?" Shaking, Chloe handed Jessica the locket. Jessica turned it over in her palm, her thumb tracing the cool silver. She opened it. Her eyes narrowed at the image of the barren tree. "Wow," she said, her voice low. "That's ominous. This isn't a gift. It's a message." She looked up at Chloe, the absolute belief in her eyes an antidote to the insanity Chloe was feeling. "Okay, tell me everything." Perched on the edge of the bed, Chloe recounted it all: the moved objects, the backhanded comments, the way Eleanor had slowly taken over the household and pushed her to the margins, making her a stranger in her own space. Jessica listened, her face growing stormier with every word. "That's classic gaslighting, Chloe," Jessica said when she had finished. "She's deliberately making you question your own sanity. She's isolating you from Ethan and making you look like the crazy one. We have to get you out of here." "Go where?" Chloe asked hopelessly. "This is my home." "No, this is a gilded cage and the warden is downstairs," Jessica shot back. "You're coming to stay with me. My apartment's not huge, but it's safe. And it's certifiably psycho-mother-in-law free." The thought of leaving was terrifying, but the thought of staying was worse. Bolstered by Jessica's presence, Chloe felt a tiny flame of resolve flicker to life. She nodded. "Okay." They went downstairs together. Eleanor and Ethan were in the living room. Ethan was pacing, looking agitated. Eleanor was sitting ramrod straight on the sofa, as serene as a waiting queen. "Jessica," Ethan said, his expression a mixture of relief and annoyance. "Thanks for coming. Chloe's not feeling well." "Oh, she's not well, Ethan," Jessica said, her voice sharp as a razor. "And I think we all know why." Eleanor sighed dramatically. "Jessica, I understand you're trying to protect your friend, but I hardly think this hostility is helpful." Chloe took a deep breath. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice clearer and steadier than she expected. "I'm going to stay with Jessica for a while." Ethan stopped his pacing and stared at her. "What? No, you can't just leave. Our problems are here. We need to work through them." "The problem is that I don't feel safe in my own home, Ethan," Chloe said, finally letting her frustration pour out. "And you do nothing but take her side." "That's not true," he protested. "I'm just trying to keep the peace." "There is no peace to keep," Jessica interjected, stepping forward. "There's silence. And in that silence, your mother is driving my friend insane. She needs space. She needs to breathe." Eleanor rose to her feet, her face a mask of offended martyrdom. "I can't believe what I'm hearing. I came here to help, to care for my daughter-in-law in her time of grief. And this is the thanks I get. To be accused of these horrible things." She looked at Ethan, her eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "You see, son, she's unstable. She needs professional help." That's when something in Ethan cracked. Maybe it was the word unstable, delivered with such cold calculation. Maybe it was the resolute look on his wife's face. Or maybe it was the presence of Jessica, an outsider, reflecting back the abnormality of the situation. "Mom," he said, his voice low and with a new edge. "Stop." Eleanor blinked, genuinely surprised. "What?" "I said stop," he repeated. "You're not helping. You're making things worse." A stunned silence fell over the room. For the first time, Eleanor's perfect mask slipped. For just a second, Chloe saw it, a flash of cold fury, a resentment so deep it almost contorted her features. Then it was gone, replaced once more by tragic distress. I only want what's best for you, Ethan," she whispered. "Then let her go," Ethan said. He turned to Chloe, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. Go, Chloe. If you think that's what you need. Just don't be gone too long. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a concession. It was his first admission that maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't entirely with Chloe. With Jessica's help, Chloe quickly packed a bag. She took only the essentials, leaving behind the life she had so carefully built. As they walked through the living room to leave, Eleanor was standing by the window, her back to them. She didn't turn around. She didn't say goodbye. Ethan followed them to the front door. I'll call you, he said awkwardly. I know, Chloe replied, unable to meet his eyes. As they drove away from the estate, Chloe looked back at the house in the rearview mirror. It looked huge and empty, and for a fleeting moment she thought she saw a figure in an upstairs window, the window of their master bedroom. It was Eleanor watching them leave. There was no look of triumph on her face. Instead, it was a look of cold, resolute determination, like a general who had lost a battle but fully intended to win the war. You did it, Jessica said softly, reaching over and squeezing Chloe's hand. The first step is done. Chloe nodded, feeling the solidness of her friend's grip. She was out. She was free. But as the familiar driveway disappeared behind them, a cold sense of unease settled over her. She had escaped the house, but she couldn't escape the feeling that Eleanor wasn't going to give up so easily. The battle for her sanity, her life, and her future had only just begun. Jessica's Brooklyn apartment was a world away from the cold splendor of Greenwich. It was small, cluttered with stacks of books and thriving green plants, and perpetually smelled of coffee and oil paint. It was a space that was lived in warm, and above all, safe. For the first time in weeks, Chloe slept through the night a deep and dreamless sleep, unhaunted by figures in the dark. The change of scenery brought a startling clarity. In that house, under Eleanor's constant scrutinizing gaze, Chloe had begun to doubt herself. The insidious words, the subtle manipulations had eroded her reality, leaving her feeling small and unstable. But here in Jessica's sun-drenched apartment, surrounded by her friends' unwavering support, the paranoia melted away, replaced by a cold certainty. She wasn't crazy. She had been under attack. She's not going to let this go, Jessica said on the third morning, handing Chloe a mug of hot coffee. People like Eleanor never cede control. She'll make another move. I know, Chloe replied, looking out the window at the bustling city life below. But this time I'll be ready. Ethan called that afternoon. His voice was tired and hesitant. Chloe, how are you? He asked. I'm okay, Ethan. I'm at Jess's. There was a pause. I know, he said. Listen, I'm sorry about everything. I haven't been listening to you. It was a start. No, you haven't, she said, not with accusation, but with simple truth. It's weird here without you, he continued. Mom, she's not saying anything. She just glides around in silence like she's waiting for something. It's creeping me out. The crack in his loyalty was widening. Ethan, she's not who you think she is, Chloe said gently. Maybe not, he admitted, and the admission was like a small earthquake. Can we talk not on the phone? In person. Somewhere neutral. Just the two of us. They agreed to meet the next day at a small cafe in the West Village. Chloe felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he was finally starting to see. But Jessica was right. Eleanor made her next move, and it came from a direction Chloe never anticipated. The next morning, just before Chloe was about to leave to meet Ethan, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. She answered hesitantly. Hello? Chloe Prescott, a cool professional woman's voice asked. Yes, this is she. This is Margaret Sterling, the chair of the Children's Art Charity Foundation. I'm calling with a bit of a concern. Eleanor has been in touch with us. Chloe's heart began to pound. She volunteered on the board of the foundation. What did she say? Chloe asked, trying to keep her voice even. Mrs. Sterling hesitated. Well, she expressed deep concern about your mental well-being after your recent tragedy. She said you are struggling a great deal, that you're having paranoid thoughts, and that perhaps it's not appropriate for you to continue with your board responsibilities at this time. She suggested you take a leave of absence to focus on your recovery. The blood in Chloe's veins turned to ice. It was brutal. It was brilliant. Eleanor wasn't calling Chloe crazy. She was cloaking herself in the guise of a concerned mother-in-law sharing her private worries with influential people. She was poisoning Chloe's reputation, painting a picture of a pitiful, unstable young woman who couldn't be relied upon. She was poisoning the well. "Mrs. Sterling, what my mother-in-law said," Chloe began, but her voice was trembling with rage and shock. "Chloe, my dear," the woman interrupted, her voice now full of condescending pity. "You don't have to explain a thing. We all understand. You take the time you need. We'll handle things here." The call ended. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of Jessica's living room, the phone slipping from her hand. She was attacking her from the outside, turning her own grief into a weapon against her. When Jessica got home and found Chloe sitting motionless, she knew instantly something had happened. After Chloe recounted the phone call, Jessica's face hardened. "Okay, that's it," she said, her voice like steel. "We're done playing defense. We're going on the attack." "How?" Chloe asked helplessly. It's her word against the word of a woman she's just successfully painted as unstable. "We don't attack her," Jessica said, her eyes lighting up with an idea. "We attack her past. Nobody gets to be that evil overnight. There has to be something, a crack in her perfect armor." That night they turned Jessica's apartment into a command center. Armed with 2 laptops and endless cups of coffee, they began to dig into Eleanor Prescott's past. At first they found little beyond the usual society pages, charity galas, gallery openings, the perfect marriage. "We need her maiden name," Jessica muttered. "Everything is Prescott. It's like she was born in that Chanel suit." Chloe racked her brain. Ethan had mentioned it once long ago. An uncommon name. "Vance," she said suddenly. "Eleanor Vance." That was the key. Typing Eleanor Vance into the search engine opened a different path, one that led away from the glossy society pages of New York and deep into the digital archives of smaller newspapers. And then they found it. A yellowed, digitized article from a local paper in a small town in Vermont, dated nearly 50 years ago. The headline read, "Tragedy strikes Vance family as youngest daughter dies." The article described a horrific accident. Eleanor's 16-year-old sister, a girl named Clara Vance, had died after falling from her bedroom balcony. It was ruled a tragic accident, but it was the last paragraph of the article that made Chloe and Jessica hold their breath. "Friends of the family," Jessica read aloud, her voice a whisper, "report that Clara had been suffering from severe nervous spells in the months leading up to her death, and that her older sister Eleanor had been devoted to her care." They looked at each other, the cold horror of the discovery settling in the air. A younger sister, one who died tragically, one who supposedly suffered from nervous spells, and Eleanor ever present in the role of the caring guardian. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. The discovery of Clara Vance changed everything. It was no longer Chloe's feelings against Eleanor's word. Now there was an echo, a ghost from the past repeating the same chilling narrative. Nervous spells. Caretaker. It was the exact script Eleanor was trying to write for Chloe. "She did the same thing to her sister," Chloe whispered, a horrified and morbid sense of validation washing over her. "She convinced everyone Clara was crazy, and then Clara died." "We don't know exactly what happened," Jessica cautioned, but her voice was tense. "But it's leverage. It's something Ethan can't ignore." Chloe had missed her meeting with Ethan, sending a terse message instead that something urgent had come up. Now she knew she had to face him, but not in a neutral cafe. This had to happen where it all began. She called Ethan. "Can you come to Jess's apartment?" she asked, her voice firm. "There's something I need to show you. It's important." The urgency in her voice convinced him. When Ethan arrived, he looked worried and drawn. He looked from Chloe to Jessica, sensing the tension in the room. "What's going on?" he asked. Without a word, Chloe turned her laptop screen toward him, displaying the old news article about Clara Vance's death. Ethan squinted to read it. As he reached the end, the color drained from his face. "Clara," he murmured. "Mom never talked much about her, just that she was sick and she passed away. A family tragedy." "She had nervous spells, Ethan," Chloe said softly. "And Eleanor was her caretaker. Do you see the parallel?" Ethan stared at the screen, then looked up at Chloe. For the first time, the defensive wall he had built around his mother began to crumble. Chloe's accusations were no longer the paranoid ramblings of a grieving woman. They were the echoes of a past tragedy. "Oh my God," he whispered, sinking into the nearest chair. "All this time, has she been—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "She was jealous," Jessica said bluntly, standing with her arms crossed. "She was jealous of the beautiful young woman who stole her perfect son's heart. She was jealous of your happiness, and she hated the thought of a baby who would cement Chloe's place in the family. Just like maybe she was jealous of her little sister for some reason." The truth, raw and ugly, hung in the air. Ethan put his head in his hands. The final pieces clicked into place: Eleanor's initial disapproval of their marriage, the subtle criticisms, the cold hostility behind the society smile. It all made sense. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice muffled. "You confront her," Chloe said. "Not me alone, not you alone, both of us. Tonight." That night they returned to the Greenwich house. It seemed darker and more silent than ever. They found Eleanor in the library, reading by the light of a single lamp. She looked up as they entered, a thin smile gracing her lips when she saw Ethan, but it vanished when she saw Chloe standing right behind him. "Ethan, you're back," she said, "and you've brought her." Ethan didn't return the greeting. He walked to the desk and placed a printout of the article about Clara on top of her book. "I want you to explain this." Eleanor glanced at the paper. For a fleeting instant, an emotion Chloe couldn't identify crossed her face. Not fear, but annoyance, as if a tiresome old secret had been unearthed. Then the mask of composure settled back into place. "That was a terrible tragedy," she said, her voice cool. "I fail to see what it has to do with this." "It has everything to do with it." Ethan's voice rose, his control finally snapping. "Nervous spells for Clara. Unstable for Chloe. What did you do to your sister Mom?" Eleanor stood, her regal bearing, her only remaining armor. "How dare you? Clara was ill. She was weak. I tried to help her." "Like you've been helping your daughter-in-law." Chloe stepped forward, her voice shaking but powerful. "By making me doubt my own sanity, by whispering curses in the dark. I saw you that night, Eleanor. I know it was you." Eleanor's denial began to fracture. "You know nothing," she hissed, the raw venom finally showing. "You came here with your perfect face and your sweet smile, and you took him from me. My son." "What are you talking about?" Ethan asked, horrified by the poison in his mother's voice. "I sacrificed everything for you," Eleanor shrieked, pointing a finger at Ethan. "Your father left. I raised you alone, molded you into the man you are. You were mine. And then this little thing comes along and thinks she can take my place, give you an heir, and push me aside. I would not let that happen." The confession hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. She hadn't admitted to causing the miscarriage directly, but she had admitted the motive. She had admitted the toxic jealousy that had fueled her every action. Ethan looked at his mother as if seeing her for the first time, not as the respectable matriarch, but as a woman consumed by bitterness and a possessive obsession. "You need help," he said, his voice broken. "And you're not going to get it here. I want you out of my house, now." Eleanor stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. But then, as the realization that she had truly lost sank in her face, seemed to collapse. The haughtiness drained away, leaving only an old, lonely, and pathetic woman. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. They heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the click of a bedroom door. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't heavy. It felt like a release. Ethan turned to Chloe, his eyes wet with tears. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I was so blind. I let her do this to you, to us. Chloe went to him and put her arms around him. We'll get through this, she whispered. Together. The next morning, Eleanor was gone. Her bags were gone. She left no note. Like a ghost, she had simply vanished from their lives. The scar she left would never completely fade. Trust had been broken, and an innocence had been lost forever, but as Chloe stood by the window with Ethan looking out at the garden in the morning light, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a very long time. The war was over. The nightmare was done. The house was no longer a cage. It could become a home again. There was a long road of healing ahead, but for the first time in months, the future wasn't a frightening void. It was a blank page waiting for them to write a new story together. Their story,